Welcome to the Monopoly Mindset, the podcast where we uncover the strategies to build your real estate portfolio one property at a time.
We're your hosts, Tyler and Tommy, here to share our story of playing real-life Monopoly.
Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, this is your go-to resource for mastering the real estate game.
So grab your board, roll the dice, and let's buy Boardwalk together. Welcome back to the Monopoly Mindset podcast, episode number 25. This episode is going to be more of a continuation from last week where we went through all the different types of bank financing for real estate purchases. Today we're kind of going to do a part two where we kind of go over more of the creative financing options. These typically don't require a bank in most cases. So these are things that if you're not really into real estate investing, there's a good chance you've never heard of. I know this whole space was very new to me, and I had no idea people do it, and then turns out a lot of these things are very common in the investment world. So
yeah, in today's market, the way that the housing market's kind of in a little bit of a crisis mode, it feels like there's a lot of these creative financing methods that the average person should learn more about, because there's ways for them to get into properties a lot simpler than going through the banks. And so we kind of touch on 5 different ways to get creative on your next finance deal, to see if any of these methods could apply to any of you. We'll have a quick story too. We can touch on 20 Richards Drive, where we, as TDJ, are doing seller financing with a tenant, and just talk about how seller financing can be a game changer for you.
well, and our property that we bought. So between the two of us, you have done a creative deal as the buyer and a creative deal as the seller.
Yeah, and I really like it. It works out well, acting as the bank, or then letting somebody else act as the bank. I think they liked it as well. So there's a lot of benefits and value to it, and hopefully we can talk more through them today and see if that can help somebody find a property.
Yeah. So first, let's do pass and go. So how was your real estate week?
Yeah, we had the tenants that moved into 42 Mill Street. Of course, there was a couple, I don't say issues, but things that they needed to get done. So we had some ceiling fans that were a little bit wobbly. The kids are like, the ceiling fan's going to fall off the ceiling. All right, I don't know if it's that bad, but we have to get those fixed. So the handyman should be out there today or tomorrow to get those tightened up and fixed. And then I had to get Comcast. We're paying for the Wi-Fi there, which I don't know. Sometimes I don't like it. I don't like paying for certain utilities, but Wi-Fi is not a terrible one to pay for. It's only like $55 a month for, I think, a 300 over 50 or something, which I think that's a good enough speed for 3 people. Unless if they're like gamers or something, then maybe they'll have to pay the difference to get a faster speed. But all in, I don't know, for $55 a month, if I can get the Wi-Fi and then bump up the kids' rent, I don't know if that's something I might do at some other properties in the future. I know it's maybe more of a hassle, but I think you get a certain level of power with having the Wi-Fi. I'm not saying I want cameras inside the property, but maybe on the outside or something along those lines. And then I've also thought about just with water, how much issues can come with water. They have these smart detectors and smart monitors and stuff now, and
Yeah.
I haven't looked into them, but if I'm hey Ty, what's your Wi-Fi? I'm the landlord. You got to hook this up for me. I mean, I'm sure it could get done, but if I owned the Wi-Fi and I could just get that hooked up by my handyman and have these little smart sensors on the ground, then I would know anytime there was water or anything like that. So I think that's why I'm leaning towards maybe thinking, and I think you could bump up rent. Hey, Wi-Fi is included. Your rent's $550 or $600. Not everybody's gonna know how cheap Wi-Fi is.
Yeah, I almost didn't like having the notifications for Hillcrest. It was like this person connected their iPad 13, and I was like, I don't care. But I did actually randomly, I just saw an ad on Instagram for those water detectors, probably because I was searching waterproofers in my area. But
Wow, send that to me, because I'm interested in learning more about them.
yeah,
So I just had
you
that
don't
hot
even
water heater break.
really, I don't even think you need one that's like smart. Honestly, you could probably, because the one I saw was like, it was an ad, it was like $300, but honestly, you could probably just get one that makes like an alarm. That's like, at least the kids will hear it, right? That you could probably get a pretty cheap one that's just like battery operated, but
Yeah, but like I've had ton of issues with the kids going home for winter break
yeah.
and not setting the heat to a certain temperature. And, I've had pipe bursts when they're not there. And, like, luckily they've been caught relatively soon before it became like a massive issue. But to have that knowledge that, hey, there's some water coming in certain spots. And then also with like storms, like sometimes the kids won't report like, hey, we got water in the basement. Like that's something I kind of want to know so we can get it aired out, get it mopped out, and like get that water up to prevent any mold and stuff. So but I think I could just do it on their Wi-Fi, so we'll see. It's definitely something I want to look into. I think it just, especially being remote, I think it gives me a little bit more sense of power and knowing what's going on at the property.
Yeah, it's funny. I like, because I've had water come into my basement here, I'm like totally open to just never buying houses with basements anymore. Like, luckily, my new house, it's a basement, but there's a French drain and it's unfinished. So it's like, okay, it'll be used for storage, but like if it floods, it's just concrete flooring. It's probably not the end of the world. My duplex does not have a basement, and so I just live in Maryland where I live next to the bay. It's so wet that like every time it rains, I'm just like, is my property gonna flood? You know what I mean? So it's nice to have those properties that don't have basements at all. And then in the Poconos, like we have this tiny like, it's basically like a shed basement, but again, all concrete. If it flooded, like it really wouldn't matter. So
Yeah, my realtor and I have talked, and they're like, Tom, we got to avoid bedrooms in the basements anymore, specifically in like the Dallas market, because they've been getting so much more water than they have in the past. They've had having almost like more flooding issues than they've had in the past, and because of all that, there's been a lot more water in basements. And so some of the properties that we have, it's been tough to like get the water out, and like it's caused more issues than we anticipated. So we're definitely doing the same thing, trying to avoid. I mean, I don't think we can avoid many houses with basements up in that area because they were built so much older, and that's just mainly how the foundations were done then. But trying to avoid, hey, it's a 3-bed upstairs, we can add 2 beds downstairs. Like, no, we want 5 beds upstairs. Is kind of the properties that we're looking at getting.
yeah, and I think also it's just because I typically have bought in older houses. Like I'm sure if I bought like a after 2010, I'm sure you're gonna have a lot less issues with basements.
Yeah, so let's get into your pass and go. What do you got going on this week?
I did my final walkthrough, and actually, it's funny that we're talking about this because really, like, theoretically, not much should change in the last 30 days. It's really just to kind of get yourself in there again. Make sure nothing drastic has happened. Like you show up and a tree fell and it went all the way through your house. Or like literally, it's been raining so much this past week that I really just wanted to go into the basement and make sure that it was dry. And that was basically the main reason. And it was dry. So, yeah, we took some measurements, we took some paint samples and started to buy some stuff. Like we need a new fridge, and we're gonna, like I said last week, we're gonna paint the house. So I started doing some research on paint sprayers. So I think I'm gonna spend a little bit of money on like good quality paint and sprayer, just because I'm saving so much money on doing it myself. And if I'm gonna do it myself and save like 5,000, I'm totally fine spending 500 on like something that's gonna make it so much quicker and easier, and then I can use it for the future. We want to do our cabinets, which I've done cabinets with a paintbrush before, and it's just like it takes forever. So yeah, then I'll have it.
Yeah, and once you get in there, get into the house, and like it's completely empty, that's the best time to paint, right? Is like you don't have anything in the way. It doesn't really matter if you get a little bit on the floor, because I think you guys are doing new floors in certain spots too. But
Actually,
you can
no,
just put like,
we're not doing any new floors, but we're kind of lucky because so the main living room has carpet in it. The foyer, the staircase, and the main hallway upstairs have carpet in it, but he just put carpet over hardwood. So like a part of the corner was coming up, so we could lift up the corner, we can see, oh, it's all hardwood. So we can literally leave the carpet there while we paint, not have to worry about paint
That's
dripping at all.
perfect.
Same with the hallway, and then the rest of the rooms we're leaving the flooring for now, so we'll obviously like put down tarp or whatever. But yeah, I'm thinking the floor
Yeah, I think the
in
paint.
good shape.
Yeah, the paint sprayer is going to be huge. You're going to save a ton of time in getting that done. So I like that idea.
Yeah, and then I think we're gonna try and get somebody in there to give us like get quotes for the bathroom like right away. So hopefully that can be done in like 2 weeks or so. I'm not really sure, but that's the plan, and then we'll start moving our stuff. So I'm super excited. It's a lot. It's a
Cool.
lot to do. Like because I have a list of stuff I want to do here, and like it's like touching up paint, but most of it's like paint because my dog has like scratched the door, and it's like I don't want to do any of that stuff until, like you said, until everything's gone. I have to dig up this tile here because I'm putting laminate throughout the basement. And so it's like I'm trying to juggle like what do I do now so that I can rent it out as fast as possible, or like it would just be 10 times easier if the house is completely empty. And then I'm like, do I take all my tools to the new house because I'm working on that house first and then bring them back, or like, it's just it's been kind of hard. And then like with the contractors, it's like, do I get them in the new house first? Do I get them in this house first? I'm trying to juggle like just I've never moved out of a house that I owned. So like when my last house I just rented, so it's just like pack all your stuff up and leave. It's pretty simple. But
Yeah.
yeah, I spent literally like all day yesterday. I woke up at 7, uh, drove to Jersey to pick up the flooring, came home, packed all day, um, and we did the podcast, and then I finished that at like 10:30. So yeah, it's just gonna be a busy time, but
Yeah,
it's all
your
about
time's gonna fly by from now up until like September. It's just gonna be like this month will be a blur from all the work that you have to do at the new house and then trying to get this place ready to rent. And hopefully you can get this place rented for September 1st. I think that'd be ideal for you, right?
yeah, because deer hunting starts September 10th. So no, I mean I
Yeah,
would
so you want
say
this off your plate.
Labor Day being the 3-day weekend, like hopefully we can have theoretically 2 full days to finish everything we need, and then one day to like enjoy it and relax. So that's the goal. I got some family coming to help me move, which is going to be huge. So yeah, obviously there'll be like
For Danielle's birthday.
I don't know. I think excuse me. I think we might push it back a week just because we don't know that the house will be ready to move in yet. So it's kind of still all up in the air. But
Yeah, hopefully the paint wise, it only needs like one coat or it's been painted recently. I know when we moved into timber and it smelled like smoke, and I don't think they painted the walls in like 20 years that they've lived there. And we were just throwing kills on there. We had to put like 2 or 3 layers of kills on the entire house to try and get this smell of smoke out. And that just took forever having to put like multiple coats. And we didn't have a sprayer, so we were using a roller. And I just remember that being very tedious because like it's one thing to paint a wall once, maybe twice, but to do it like 3 times with just kills and then put your final coat on top of it, that was a huge pain. So hopefully your process is a little bit easier.
yeah, we're gonna try and just do one coat because all of our walls now are white. So obviously it's easier to put a darker paint on a lighter
Hmm.
paint, and so white is the easiest thing to paint over. If you went from like super dark to white, you're definitely gonna have to do multiple coats. But yeah, shout out to my mom because I know she listens to every episode, and she called me and she's gonna come over the day after we close and help me paint like all weekend. So she's painted like their whole house, which is pretty big. So she's
Wow. Shout out, Judy. Thank you for helping out the Browns.
yeah. But yeah. So how was your week?
I went, so my week's
Oh
over.
yeah,
But let's get
right.
you- you- You're all good. I didn't have that much to talk about today. Really, just the fans and paying for Xfinity for the kids over there. So all that squared away. I felt like a jerk though because the kids wanted, like, I didn't realize how long it would take to get Comcast installed, and I just had a busy week with everything in my personal life that Sarah and I had going on. And so it slipped my mind to call and get like the Wi-Fi set up for Saturday when they were moving in. So I called like on Friday, or I might even called Saturday once they were there, and they couldn't get there until like the following Saturday. So I'm like, all right, sorry guys, you don't got Wi-Fi for a week until it gets there, which technically we gave them a weird move-in date. We've been a little bit lax with the GAs and giving them, a little bit more flexibility than a typical lease. So it starts technically August 1st, but they moved in a little bit earlier. So by the time that Wi-Fi gets installed, I think it's like August 2nd or something. So not that bad.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna get into the creative finance method. So why don't you start out and tell us about seller financing, since you're more experienced in it than myself.
Not that much more experience, but seller financing, how it works, really the seller just acts as a bank and you pay them in installments. And it's, instead of just going to like Wells Fargo and paying them, like Tyler Brown's my bank and I'm going to make my payments directly to him, whether that's, check, Zelle, Venmo, however you guys describe it in like the agreement. That's how, seller financing is going to work. Some perks are you can really negotiate the interest rate. So instead of going to a bank and like, Fannie Mae might have a standard rate of 6.5% right now, Ty and I can agree to 4%. So it gives you some more things that you can negotiate throughout the deal. You can also talk about the term, like how long is it going to be for. A lot of seller financing that Ty and I have done is probably the abnormal. I don't think a lot of people do 3-year terms. That's what we've done in both when him and I bought our seller financing deal, and then when I sold a property with TDJ, we also used a 3-year term. And we say 3-year term, it's based off a 30-year term, like that's how it's amortized. But we do a 3-year increment of like, hey, this seller financing deal is for 3 years. After 3 years, you have to go to the bank and get a different interest rate and kind of buy us out of the loan.
Yeah, a 3-year balloon.
Yeah, 3-year balloon. And that's kind of like the balloon payments are directly with the seller. So you're basically going to pay them for the 3 years. And then after that, you have to go to a bank and get a traditional mortgage, which it works out perfectly because in 3 years, the way Ty and I anticipate it is that we're going to get better interest rates. Like, I mean, last year we would have been at like 7.5. We're already down to almost like 6.5, but probably 7.5 to like 7, depending on if we went DSCR. So we're down almost half a percentage point, and like our hope is that another 2 years from now rates are a little bit lower, and hopefully we get down to 5. But the other benefit is that we're paying. I think we got a 3% interest rate, so we're paying a hefty amount of principal based off having a 3% rate right now towards our principal payments. So once we go in 3 years to refinance this, we're hoping that the property is going to appraise a little bit in value. We can take it to the bank, and we'll be able to get a property under contract with essentially no money out of our own pocket at that time. So those are some added benefits of seller financing.
Yeah, there's so many benefits of seller financing, and one of the biggest ones that you didn't touch on was down payment is negotiable. And typically for younger investors like us, down payment is like the biggest hurdle to acquire more properties when you have to put down 20 to 25%. So you can literally negotiate everything. A lot of people get deals 0% down, or they'll do 0% down and the seller pays all closing costs depending on the seller's situation. So like you can literally purchase a property with $0 out of pocket. Now, again, your monthly payment's going to be higher. You're going to be a lot more leveraged. I'm not saying 0% down is the best possible option, but it definitely allows you to grow quicker. Assuming you should probably have like a good amount in savings, but I mean, we bought our property with 8% down. So yeah, seller financing is just huge because you make all the rules that you negotiate with the seller versus a bank has the rules in place. There's nothing you can do to really get less than 20% down if that's what the bank offers. So
Yeah, and I found most sellers, as long as you meet their asking price, I mean, a lot of them, that's where they're the most concerned. Like, hey, I want $250,000 for this price. It's like, all right, well, we want to do a 2% rate with like 1% down. Like, okay, well, I'm still getting my $250,000 price. Okay, like that's where they seem to be like held up the most, is wanting to get that price. Which is also flexible. You can also, negotiate the price. And that's kind of like the coolest part about these, to your point, is that we can continuously negotiate. Like the entire sale is negotiable. And you're not really going through a realtor that's going to maybe tell you everything, maybe tell you half of what their conversation is with the other realtor. It's, seller, buyer, everybody's out of the picture. And you also save on a lot of those closing costs because you're not including a realtor. So the $15,000 or $20,000 commissions that might be paid out to both realtors overall is now something that either the seller is going to get or you can get as the buyer, as off on the deal. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that, but you got to do a lot of research too. You don't really want to do it blind. You should do research, be a little bit knowledgeable, come up with a game plan of how you're going to offer it. And it's something that you should be having a question about like almost every time. Like you're never going to get an answer to something without asking that question, right? And I think more people should learn about seller financing because there's so many houses that are sitting on the market. There's a ton selling quickly if you have a good house, but there's some bad houses that are sitting there. And if you're the seller and you have no options, or you have somebody that wants to buy it seller financing, you might be open to at least entertaining it. And so I think a lot of people should be asking, hey, are you open to seller financing? And there's no harm in asking that question. Even if realtors are involved and you don't necessarily want to have that conversation by yourself, then tell your realtor, hey, ask them if they're open to seller financing. I might be able to get closer to their asking price if we do seller financing. And I think it's something that's going to be used a lot more with the way the market is right now.
yeah, I will just say that most of the time, the seller is going to be an investor. I would say in most seller financing cases, because most homeowners, like if they're moving out, most of the time they're just going to sell that property. They need that down payment or that money for their next property. Whereas an investor is looking at a house as a monthly payment. So whether they own the house or not, they're still getting that monthly payment, and they don't need the money right away, right? So you can still give them, let's say, like a $20,000 down payment, but they don't need, if they have $100,000 in equity, they don't need that money today. So they're going to be okay with waiting 3, 5, 7 years to get that money, if they're still getting monthly income. And also, it's typically a little easier if they own the property free and clear. That's definitely not always the case. Like they can have a mortgage still, but your best options, I think, is investor that owns the property cash, doesn't need the cash right now, but still wants to get a return. But they're kind of taking away the headache of owning real estate. They're now just kind of like they are like a private money lender essentially. And to your point,
Yeah.
realtors, I will say that it seems like most realtors aren't going to go that route for you, because typically, like you mentioned, there's no commissions. So I'm sure you could I've thought about like typically the seller pays commission, but if I was using my realtor and the seller didn't want to pay the commission, I think it would be worth it to just throw my realtor, pay him the 3% myself. But typically they're not, it's just not traditional at all, right? And most of the time, realtors aren't involved in the transaction. I'm not saying every time, but yeah. So
Yeah, but it's something I've talked about in the past, and like we reached out to a realtor and we got one potential seller financing deal. We didn't necessarily do too much with it. There was some things with it that we didn't love, but it's worth asking different realtors. And always, I don't want to say shop around your realtor. I know if you get a relationship with somebody, you're relatively working with that person, but I don't think it's the end of the world to ask them if they know other realtors, if they know of any seller financing type opportunities, because you might be right, but they could be working with other investors or even other homeowners, and that person has had a property they've been trying to sell for a long period of time, or it's just been taken off. It's kind of like, hey, we've tried selling it, we're getting nowhere, they would sell it. Those are some of the opportunities where they might entertain seller financing, and the best person to know those conversations is a realtor. So having them, not every realtor is going to want to do it, but if you can find one that's open to getting you those properties, that could be somebody that you definitely want to do business with.
Yeah, so that leads us into our second creative financing option, which is called subject to, or a lot of people just say sub to. This is similar, but now you're kind of more targeting homeowners or in distressed situations. So how sub 2 works is you purchase the property from them, meaning the title or the deed transfers into your name, so you own the property, but they keep their mortgage and you pay their mortgage for them. So this can happen in situations where the seller is underwater, they can't make their payments anymore, and you're preventing them from basically foreclosing. And if they're underwater, so they um, they owe 120, but their house is only worth 100, or they owe 120 and they need to make $20,000 in repairs in order to sell it. Uh, they're not gonna, let's say they lose their job. There's definitely some hardship involved. They lose their job, a divorce, and you're not preying on people at their weakest moments. You're almost preventing um, a foreclosure for them, right? And a lot of people, there are definitely situations where people are like, "Hey, I don't want to make any money from this property. I don't want to walk away with anything. I just want like to forget about it." And this is like a perfect scenario for them because you're getting the property off their hands. They don't have to make a single repair. They don't have to make a single. They don't have to spend $1 out of pocket. Um, which they're underwater, so like they could almost be making that difference. But you're getting a property with 0% down because you're not making a down payment. You're not getting a new loan. You're just paying their existing loan. So you're basically buying the property for whatever their balance is left on that loan. So they have a 30-year loan, 5 years have gone by. Now their balance is 120. Let's say the house might only be worth 110. Um, you could buy it for 120 and you're like, well, you're paying more than it's worth. Yeah, but you're getting 0% down and you have the money as the investor to maybe fix it up and make it worth 150, 160. So we have not done this option, but people have a lot of success doing this.
Yeah, and it gets a little bit trickier with how to get the property. Like I guess it's easier to get the title transferred. One of the trickier parts is sometimes they do try to get the loan into the buyer's name, which like you can contact the bank and say, hey, I've made the payments for X amount of time. Like, can we switch it to our name? But it sometimes would bring on the due on sale clause and then it kind of blows up the deal, which is not something that you necessarily want to do. So that's why they typically leave the loan in the seller's name. It's definitely happened in distressed situations, but I think it also can happen if there's just a good interest rate. I mean, 3% rates were very prevalent 5 years ago. So people that have 3% interest rates, right, they might understand like the power and value in that, and maybe they can get a little bit more for their property. I think there's certain instances where, I mean, you can do 0% down, but even if, let's say, kind of like good scenarios for the seller, let's say the house is worth 300 and they only owe 220, like maybe they can get 20K down from you, or like a secondary loan for 20K or something, or 30K to get more. I think it can happen in that scenario as well,
or even 80. Like you could give them, if they have 80,000 in equity, you could give them 80 and then now you owe the 220 that they have left on their balance.
Exactly. And like it's still attractive for the buyer to do that because you're getting 220 at the 3% rate that's been amortized already 5 years into the loan. So you're getting more principal pay down, and it's definitely a very attractive option when there's lower interest rates involved. A lot of like, not FHA, the military loan. VA. A lot of VA loans are very attractive too because people have like low interest rates with VA loans, and so if that's something that you can purchase that way, those are very attractive as well. I think there's actually a website like valoans.com or something where you can like look at expiring VA loans. I think the problem with this is it's a little bit trickier to find a person that has a loan that's okay with transferring the title to you. They're a little bit more work, but if you can find something, they can be very advantageous to be able to take over a 3% rate.
Yeah, I will say that it's a little bit, I think the hardest part is it's a little bit of a risk from the seller's perspective because so you're gonna take over their login. Let's say like you get their login information. You're paying the payments because you don't want to pay them and then they pay the payments because if they foreclose, the bank can still take, even though you own the property, the bank is a second lien still on the property. The bank could take your property. However, on the flip side, what if the buyer forecloses? Well, the seller now has a foreclosure, even though they don't own the property anymore, they still have the note attached to their name. So if the buyer forecloses or doesn't make the payments, now the seller kind of got screwed because they have a foreclosure. And also in terms of like debt to income ratio, if you run a credit check, that payment is still going to show up under the seller's name. So if they were later to try and go buy another house, that debt is going to show up under the original seller, even though they don't own the house anymore. So it's a little bit of a risk, but again, it helps people prevent foreclosure all the time. So
And that's why Ty talked about it earlier. It's a little bit more for distressed situations because with that risk that comes with it, you're usually going to get somebody to agree with it if they're in a distressed situation. If they're not, they might say, "Hey, no, I'd rather just sell you the property or, something else." But yeah, that's what makes it a little bit different.
yeah, I don't know that I would want to go that route, but if it was my only option, I would rather go that route than foreclosing on my property.
Yeah. All right.
Right.
Leads
Yeah,
us
go
into
ahead.
our next scenario, which are like lease options slash rent to own. Relatively the same terminology there. But you basically lease the property with the option to buy at a fixed price within a set period. So usually they're 2 to 3 years. Maybe some have gone for a year. You can structure it so part of the rent goes towards the purchase price. I've seen that scenario, or like other times, like, hey, you rent this for 2 years, and then at the end of the 2 years, you have the opportunity to buy the property for a specific price. And it typically includes like upfront fees and sometimes like a higher monthly rent if it's going to be going towards the principal payment. I think it's a really good option for people that are renting today to talk to their landlords. Specifically like if you're renting a townhome or a single family house, maybe like a duplex if you're in one's unit might be tougher to get them to sell, but it's still worth asking. I think there's no issues in today's market with the way like buyers have there's so much value in being a buyer right now because for a seller, they've owned a property that's appreciated so much in value, but as a real estate property owner, it's tough to access that equity. And so if you're a buyer in these scenarios and you can say, hey, are you open to rent to own or like a lease option? You can come up with like if that person wants to tap into their equity, it's a way that they can, know they're going to sell the property in 2 to 5 years and not have to really think about it at all. It's like, it's always a stressful thing. Oh, okay, I got to list this property. I got to find a realtor. I got to put it on the market. I got to fix it up. But it's like, hey, Ty's renting it today and he wants to buy it for X. Like, okay, I can save all of those staging costs, all the realtor costs, and just sell it to Ty. It becomes really attractive. And so a lot of people right now, because of the appreciation and them having a little bit of extra equity in their properties, I think it's worth that conversation if you're renting today. Hey, are you open to like a rent to own? I'll stay here another 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. Let's put some of that towards like the down. Like sometimes the payment can go towards the down payment. I found a lot of landlords can be flexible because like at the same time, like you're a landlord, you're wanting to provide housing to people, but you also want to help people in certain life situations too. And if somebody comes up to you with a thought out plan of how to buy your property, you're going to have more respect for them. And like I've seen like, hey, we just don't have the cash. Well, let's set aside part of your monthly rent and that'll be go towards your down payment. And there's a lot of ways to structure like these rent to own scenarios.
Yeah, and I feel like in most cases also the maintenance cost transfers to the renter.
Yeah.
So I don't know about massive things like a roof, like let's say a month after you sign the paperwork, they, I don't know, like, that stuff's all negotiable, but like HVAC goes out in 2 years. Well, like it is their responsibility to fix it. So it's definitely beneficial for both the buyer and the seller. I feel like for the buyer, it's typically for people where they're not going to get approved from a bank right now. So, like, let's just say, I don't know, their credit score is really bad and they're working to get that credit score back up if they're at like 500. But they know that in 2 years, all right, they have a plan, pay off these bills, these credit cards, whatever. And in 3 years, their credit score is going to be 650. Well, like, this is a great scenario where they can start the purchase. They get a price locked in. They're getting principal, and then in 3 years they can go refinance. Well, I guess it's not a refinance, but they're going to now be able to get approved by a bank and go and purchase that way. Because if you can get approved up front, I guess you could theoretically just go to a bank right away. But maybe also the seller doesn't want to do that. Maybe like there's definitely a lot of sellers that only will offer like, hey, the property's not for sale, but we can do rent to own. Like I've definitely thought about that. Like I'm not going to list it, but if they came to me and wanted to do rent to own, I would consider it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just it's almost tough to break down a rent to own scenario because there's so much variability. I mean, our seller financing deal was almost like a rent to own agreement. Like there's so many different ways to structure a rent to own agreement, and some people can just switch it into seller financing. So it could be a 2-year agreement and then come with your own financing, or it could be a 2-year agreement that then switches over to seller financing. Like there's a lot of different variables, and regardless, it's a conversation a lot more people should have, whether if you're renting today at like a townhome. I think it's a conversation where the landlord might actually be interested in getting that additional revenue from a sale.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've pretty much done individual episodes really focusing on each one of these because we bought a property that way. But we mentioned in the past, if the buyer stops making their rent payment, it's in the contract that the contract is voided and you get to keep the down payment. So it's obviously a huge incentive for them to make their payment. If they put down $20,000, they're not just going to want to, void the contract and they lose their 20 grand. The seller keeps the 20 grand, but it is kind of a cover your ass from the seller's perspective. So
yeah, I would argue it's one of my favorite options for people renting today. Like, just ask the question. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but you're never going to know an answer unless if you start asking questions. And this is a great question to ask. Like, hey, are you open to rent to own? And whether if they're with a management company today or not, still getting that, sent from the management company over to the owner, they're going to send that, request up to them, at least let them review it. And you have nothing to lose. Worst case, they know that you're a pretty good tenant and you want to live there or potentially buy it. Might not work today, but maybe a year from now or 2 years from now, it can get brought back up. And like, again, the property is going to keep appreciating. The landlord's going to have more and more equity in said property. So it might always be in the back of his mind, hey, Ty said he's going to buy that property. Like, maybe I should just sell it to them. So I think a lot of people should exercise rent to own, bring up the conversation, and just ask, if the owner would be interested in it.
yeah, except for the day that you sign the contract, the appreciation stops for the seller and it starts for the buyer because you locked in a price. So the buyer has it under contract at 200. Well, by the time they actually buy it in 3 years, it might be worth 230, and now they have $30,000 in equity. So yeah, that's pretty much it for rent to own. The last option that we have, at least for purchasing, is private money lending, which again we talk a lot about. And same thing here. You can decide with the lender every single variable. So this is just getting a third party person to fund the deal 100% or whatever. Maybe you put a down payment, maybe you don't. I feel like private money lending is very typical for short term like renovations. So like we talked about hard money in the last episode. I feel like it's generally used more for like less than 12 months. So a flip, a burr, you're going to buy the place with cash with the hard money. They're going to fund the renovation, and then you're going to refinance into a 30-year whatever, a long-term loan with a bank. Just because I feel like, let's say you have a private lender, are they going to want to do a 30-year loan? I don't know. It's like their interest rate is probably going to be pretty high if they want to do all 30 years. So it's like, are you going to get a lower interest rate than at the bank, or is a lender going to accept that? I don't know, but it definitely can be used for quick lending where you're going to give them like 8, 9, 10, 12% in 6 months. So.
Probably not a terrible idea if a private money lender did want to just do like a 30-year mortgage. I mean, they would make a heck of a lot of money if they did decide to do that. It's 6%.
But the way that I look at it is you can get 10% in the market over 30 years. Like they could put that money into the S&P 500 and get 10%. So then in my mind, you're going to have to pay them 11% because there's risk involved, right, with owning real estate. So like, why would they? And I know some people will do 6%, but like they could also put it in like the treasury bond and get like 5. So I don't know. I just think it like I'm looking at it as like, what would I do as a lender? And I'm not doing a 30-year loan unless you're giving me 12%. And why would anybody do that? But that's
So to Ty's point, a lot more private money lending. It's most likely not going to be for an actual property purchase too, because that's such a large amount. For the most part, I'm thinking this is more like down payments on a certain property. Like maybe you're taking a loan out from a friend or a family member or like another local investor, and they have usually like a balloon period for 1 to 5 years. So you might take the like maximum is probably close to that 5-year mark. Like, hey, let me borrow this 50 grand. I'm going to use some of it for a down payment. I'm use some of it to paint this property. Once I get enough equity in this house or like equity in a different house, I can refinance and pay you out. Or, I have something that I can sell that I can pay you back with, like, kind of talking that through. But I think it's more for like down payment assistance or renovations. It's tough to maybe get a full property with a private money loan.
Yeah, I think where we're at and like our current network, but I do think there's a lot of people out there that are basically replacing hard money with private money, because I mean, again, there's a lot of people out there with 500 grand cash just sitting around. Like, it's not us, but there is a lot of people. And like, if you're going to give them a 12% return, like that's not, that's not that much money for them. If you want like 200 grand, I know it seems like who has 500 grand laying around, but again, there are people.
And like I guess like to break that down even further, say if you do that for 5 years, I wonder if that's just interest only that you're paying them, right, with no principal payments. So what's 500K at 12% interest only compared to paying a $500,000 mortgage? Like, I wonder if it's
60,000 in year one.
What?
60,000 a year.
So it's going to be significantly more expensive than getting a mortgage.
Yeah, that's why I said you don't want to do a 5-year private money typically. You would just go get a 7.5% mortgage. But private money is awesome because for a purchases you can offer cash, right? So no contingencies, no appraisal, no inspection, nothing, cash. You can close in 2 weeks. Same as hard money. They're kind of the same, except for hard money is a bank and probably higher rates than private money. So in my opinion, private money is like the goal of real estate. Is like use banks, get yourself established and have a good track record of proving to people that you know how to make money in real estate, and then you can kind of convince people with your track record to lend to you, and they're going to get a great return. You're going to get cheaper money than hard money. But yeah, and then it also kind of gets into syndication, which we're not really going to go over too much, but syndication's basically the similar idea, except for they're part of the deal. And so, they might be in it for 5 years, and then when you sell, they get their money back and a portion of the equity. But again, there's just so many ways to set all of these things up that there's no like set down payment interest rate. Like, it's all negotiable, which is the biggest pro of all of these methods versus going to a bank.
Yeah, and it's really just talking to people, building relationships, letting them know what you do, what you're interested in. And if somebody's got cash and you're having that conversation and you tell them, hey, I want to buy a house, I don't necessarily have the money. I mean, you're not really asking them for the money, but you're just telling them what you're going on and what you're going through. And if you are somebody like us that have purchased a couple of properties, we might look a little bit more attractive on paper to somebody that wants to, loan some money. There's a lot of people that want to invest in real estate, but they're too scared to invest on their own or they look at it as daunting. Like, hey, I know a lot of people make money in real estate, but I don't want to learn all that. I don't want to buy the property. I don't want to be the person called at 2 a.m. So they can, be somebody that you can entice them to say, hey, like, you can invest in real estate through me. So you kind of got to build your track record up, and that's something Ty and I are actively working on doing. But at the end of the day, it's just having those conversations and talking about what your goals are and that you want to get into a property. And sometimes somebody might want to help you, and they can make money, 10% return, 11, whatever that might be on their end. And when you have $500,000 cash sitting in a bank to loan it out and get 10 or 11%, it's not a bad gig for that person.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last thing that we wanted to talk about is it's not really financing. It does not fall under purchasing a house, but that's wholesaling. So this is just a way to make money. This is more of a job, and it's very common in the investment world. Again, I didn't know this was a thing before I started listening like Bigger Pockets, but it's very common in the investing world. And that's just, you get a property under contract to purchase, but you don't actually buy it yourself. And then you sell that contract, let's say, to an investor, and you keep the difference. So you get a property under contract for 100, you go to an investor and say, hey, I got this good deal. And even at 120, it's a good deal. So you have to get it for like significantly under value. But at 120, the investor still wants to buy it. So they buy it for 120, and you get to keep that $20,000 difference. Your name is never on the title. You never spend any money out of pocket. Again, it's a job. It's not an investment. It's a grind. We don't do it, obviously. It's, as far as I know, to be like really good at it, it's like a full-time job. And
Go ahead.
We've never used wholesalers to purchase, because I think, for me anyway, there has to be like a huge level of trust there, or at least like a great referral to somebody that I trust that's used a specific wholesaler. But it's super common, and investors get great deals through wholesalers, and they don't have to put in that time to send out mailers, to knock on doors, to cold call people to get those deals. So, they're still going to get the good deal at 120, and the wholesaler is going to make their 20 grand, and the seller is going to get the 100.
I think one of the other reasons we brought this up is, let's say you're maybe too scared to have a conversation with a landlord or a seller, or trying to find some of these creative solutions on your own, and you don't really want to bring it up to a realtor, or the realtor is giving you a runaround. Finding a local wholesaler and just Googling, local wholesalers and giving them some calls might be a little bit easier. It's completely free. You can reach out to the wholesaler and let them know, hey, I'm looking for creative solutions. And they have a bunch of mailers that they send out, people that they're calling, and they might be the ones that find more subject to deals in certain markets. And they might find somebody that could be open to seller financing. I'm not sure if that's like a complete market strategy that some of these wholesalers are doing, but they are sending out mailers and reaching out to sellers all the time. And so building a relationship with a wholesaler and asking them if they have any opportunities for creative solutions, you could just become somebody in their Rolodex if they find a deal like that they could potentially, sell off to you. So I think it's worth reaching out to wholesalers as well if you are curious about creative solutions and seeing if you can get them to help you find some of those properties.
Yeah, that's a really good point because all wholesale deals are off market, right? So now you can take all these strategies and you can combine them. So like I've for sure seen wholesalers flipping creative financing deals. So let's say a wholesaler has like a seller financing deal, and typically with that, I believe they'll just take a cut, like they'll just charge a fee. So like let's say they charge a $10,000 fee and the seller wants a $20,000 down payment. So now you need 30 grand to get the seller financing deal. Then you go get private money for the 30 grand, use that as your down payment. So you've used a wholesaler, you've used seller financing, you've used private money, and so you can kind of creatively group all these things together to again get properties with less money down than just going to a bank and buying a property on market.
Yeah, and Ty, pretty much to recap here, almost went through three of the options. He almost nailed all five, but basically today we recapped five methods. We did seller financing, we did subject to, lease options / rent to own, and we went through some private money and talked about wholesaling as a way to find those types of deals. And the key takeaway that we had for today is you don't need a bank to buy your next property. You just need the right strategy for the right deal.
Yeah, so tune in next week. I'm really excited because it's 26, so I got something special planned for that. And by next episode, I'll also have closed on my house. So one more property in the books for us.
Awesome. See you guys next week.
Yep, bye.